What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, here we are. It's another crazy week in Paraguayan football. You know, always one of these crazy weeks as we've seen one big giant really go through a slaying. And, a lot of things have been going on with this big giant that we'll talk about in a bit. We'll talk about how the other Paraguayan teams have done in the Libertadores and the Sudamericana, and we'll also talk about a Paraguay national team that, again, they have achieved another qualification for the World Cup. Not the original, not the official World Cup, not yet, but another World Cup. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I think we need to go straight to what's going on with El Decano, with the Rey de Copas, with Olimpia, Fede, because that has been the talk of the town in the last week of what's been going on with Olimpia, with their result against Velez, losing 4-0 at home at the Defensores, and then the sacking of Martin Palermo. I mean, there's a lot we can go through, but I feel like that's the first one that we need to go to because it's fresh in our memories. We're talking literally roughly 12 hours since the sacking of Martin Palermo, which I think was inevitable after this loss. But yeah, it's been a crazy week in Olympia world right now, Fede.
Hi, Roberto. Hi, Rob. Hi to everyone listening to Guarani Vision. Great to be back for another one. And this is the way we're going to start, Roberto. On the sour note, on the worst team, on the team that's doing so bad in the start of this 2025. Who would have thought, right? The last champion, the way they ended up last year, and not to be able to build a good team. Everyone that has come into this team has not shown up. I mean, everyone's talking about that, right? Benedetto, the new defenders, nobody's chipping in, and they've had so many problems. We talked about this last week, and I did not think it was going to get ugly this fast, to be honest with you guys. But, when you have an embarrassing 4-0 at home, and you lost to San Antonio Bulo, who nobody pretty much knew before this Libertadores, it was meant to happen. I mean, Olimpia is not a small club. Olimpia has its history, and these two losses were really embarrassing for a team like Olimpia, and fans were going all over the place at, the president, at Martin Palermo, at certain players, at everything that has been done so far during this season, and it does not look good for Olimpia. We'll see. We'll see who comes in now to take over in this locker room. Martin Palermo definitely could not handle it, and all the players that he brought. I mean, nobody really contributed so far. So it was really on him, also, because it was up to his signings. He pretty much pointed at all of these players that Olimpia ended up bringing. And it is one of the talking points here in Paraguay, Roberto. No doubt about it. It's Olimpia's worst start in the Libertadores, no doubt about it. I thought Olimpia, the giant, the king of the Libertadores in Paraguay, was going to be totally different in this 2025, but so far, it's been looking really bad for them.
Yeah, I think your name and your prestige can go oh so far in terms of how you feel as a favorite and an underdog. So, Ralph, going to you on this one, I feel like, you know, really it feels as if though we've kind of felt like every time that Olympia, and maybe some people feel this way too that are Olympia fans, but I think this idea of this sort of mystique that they've always had, obviously three-time world champ, three-time Libertadores champion, they won the world championship back in 79, so they have that history in comparison to like other South American teams. But again, that can only get you so far when that sort of history mystique gets to you and you get a team like San Antonio Budo getting a shock, or Velez scoring four against you. Like, I feel like that name alone can get you so far if you don't obviously reinforce well and you're not up to the standards to what the rest of the continent can offer.
Well, yeah, I mean, hi everybody first. That's what was so surprising about the Velez result, because I think usually the name and the weight has done so much for Olimpia. I mean, just to put this in context, is the worst defeat since 1966, like equal worst defeat they've suffered at home, which was also 4-0, but to Católica. It's only the second time they've ever lost at home in the Libertadores to an Argentinian team. Think how many Argentinian sides have been to face Olimpia, and they've only lost once. It was to Rosario Central. The Velez are the only team to win twice in Paraguay against Olimpia. I mean, it's incredible when you start putting it into context, just the fact that they lost, and then you look at how they lost and the 4-0, and it was really poor as well. I mean, we can go into later the defending, just the huge gaps they're leaving. So I think all of that combined one made it impossible for Palermo to continue. I mean, that, and they haven't won in 6 games. But then also, to your point, Roberto, it makes you think, yeah, did the Bula Bula result almost kind of, burst a balloon kind of thing, that Olimpia aren't this big team that people should be afraid of. But to me, it's all been very surprising, because if you think about how they won the league, they didn't win the league playing very well. They were never like, running away, beating teams. But what they really had was a very good kind of mentality, resilience. They were defensively strong, but also they always found a way just to find the results at the end, even if they weren't playing very well. And this season, that just hasn't worked for Palermo, and it's almost gone the other way. The way they lost to Guarani at the weekend, and then these results, the Bula Bula was also a last minute result. They just haven't found that winning mentality, and it's really strange to see how it's kind of vanished just in a few months.
Yeah, and of course the Velez result was the complete capitulation of all that. I think it's a result that I think was shocking, and more so I think because of the way that it was their first game at home. They had just lost the game against Bula Bula, so you felt like normally any team would try to respond when going into a must-win game in this case, because they really did try. Looking at the stats real quick, actually, guys. Olimpia had 26 shots compared to Velez's 11. That just shows how much Olimpia were really going for it. But again, it was the defense that was just being rammed over. I mean, Romero scoring, Carrizo and Piscini getting the goals for Velez, and you just felt, I'll go to Ralph on this one first, that, it felt like it was going to get ugly really soon. I think the way, like you said, the way that they've been performing, and mind you, this is a team that also had the most possession. They had 58 compared to 42 to Velez, so they were constantly dominating the ball on that end, but they just couldn't take away their chances. And whereas Velez did in their 4 goals, if you're getting 4 goals out of 11 and Olimpia got 0 out of 26, then something is going wrong. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot that you can go for. I think certainly the performance of, everyone wants to talk about Benedetto and kind of his response, him shushing the fans. I think that's the first obvious culprit in this one, but you look at the defense of obviously with Lisandro Lopez and Junior Orlando Barreto. I think it's just certainly something that you don't know where to go from there. And Zavala and Rojas and the fullback, and obviously Armenia is the goalkeeper. Like him not being up to the standard. I think you can obviously blame Benedetto for not being able to take his chances, especially given the sort of the prestige and the name of him always knowing one, to play in these games, and two, always playing against Argentine opposition. But that defense was absolutely shocking on the night over there in Defensores.
Yeah, I think it's the way they were found out, Olimpia as a collective. I mean, definitely the defense, but just the way they kind of started, because you mentioned how many shots they had, the possession, but then you look at the quality of the chances in the XG, it's almost like twice as much for Velez. So Velez were much more clinical in what they were doing. And you just think of the way they set up. So Lisandro Lopez, Barreto, and then Robert Rojas as the fullback is very slow. So they had this very slow team. They were trying to attack, and they just were getting caught out on the counter the whole time. And so you just think the whole way it was set up wasn't the right way to go. It wasn't the right way to go. I'm sorry.
No problem, Ralph. Take your time, get some water. I'm gonna go in with this one. Olimpia, that defense. I've been talking about it all year long. Robert Rojas, they brought him in. How much did they pay for him? I don't even want to talk about that. Lisandro Lopez, he came, he wasn't ready for it. Didn't start the year off. Took him a while to get into the starting team. Finally, into the starting team, nothing out of this world for a player that has played in the European League, that has played and gone around. He should have been the leader in that defense. He wasn't the leader. Barreto, how long has this player been in Olimpia? He should be one of the best players in this team now. No, he was injured. And now he's come back. Worst player probably in that defense in this game against Velez. So many mistakes. Everyone had a bad game in that defense. And I'm not even going to get into Arcemandia because it was his opportunity, with Olveira being down, just like Ralph said. And He's been scored on every single game. He has not been able to keep a clean sheet ever since he took over. So it's been a confidence factor, I believe, also behind it. It's not just we've been injured, we haven't been able to get our stuff together. Robert Rojas has not come into this team in his best version, and he's been used as a right back because that's the way Palermo always saw it. He never saw him as a center back, and I never seen him as a right back. I've never thought that his best version in a big team, in a team that you need to attack. I don't think you're gonna get the best Robert Rojas in that situation, and that was kind of weird for me. Also certain decisions that Palermo ended up making, even in certain spots that he brought players into this team. Yeah, I think it was a good signing to bring in Javier Dominguez, but you didn't have competition in certain places. I mean, if you take out Richard Ortiz out of this team, who's gonna come into that midfield and take over? You don't have another Richard Ortiz or another player that can do something different. And Richard Ortiz has been playing for so long, and I don't think he's been feeling that competition lately. I think he's been way too comfortable being the captain of this team and thinking that he can make the difference whenever he feels that he can make the difference or whenever he wants. But I'm not with that. I think Palermo gave some of the old players or the experienced players way too much power in that locker room. And I've seen this before, Ralph, and it has not worked out well for most of these coaches. And there were players that last year were very important, like Lucas Prato, Eric Lopez, and they ended up falling away from this team. Palermo ended up going in a totally different direction, especially with the players that he ended up bringing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about as you were talking, that look at the players that won the title and then where are they now? And so Prato and Eric Lopez. Eric Lopez was on the bench, he didn't even come on. Of course, we have to talk about Manuel Capasso that isn't there anymore because they didn't want to pay the clause for him. And of course, this is with hindsight, but it just seems there was such a huge mistake where your defense has now been such a problem, and you've instead of retaining the services of one player with a very large clause, you've brought like 3 defenders in, and none of them are doing the job. So, I mean, I think obviously that's with hindsight, but you've seen some kind of mistakes there with the setup. But just going back to who has the power in the locker room, and we'll go to Benedetto. How really did Benedetto get 75 minutes in that game? I mean, it's fine. Okay, you want to start him. I think you should start him because you know the quality he has, and it's a big game. But really, looking at halftime, he's missed a whole bunch of chances. And so the first sub, instead of taking him off, he took off Alex Franco in midfield to put on Derlis to go even more attacking. And that's when almost immediately the third goal comes after that. And I just feel that was a big mistake. I mean, that would have been a time for Benedetto to go, for Derlis to come on. And so he's giving him maybe too much time for a player that hasn't scored in, 2 years? Or definitely at least a year, over a year. I mean, the last time he scored, by the way, as manager was Diego Martinez, the Cerro manager at Boca. That's how long it's been. So I think he was maybe he's been, pandering too much to these kind of big players and not really trying to find the essence of what his team was that won the championship. Like we said, that they didn't play very well, but they had players that worked very hard and found results when they had to. And then the whole Benedetto thing, I mean, shushing the crowd that's an incredible bit of arrogance from somebody that hasn't scored a goal yet. He's basically had a good 15 minutes in the Clásico where he got the assist. That's his whole Olimpia career. He's not even fit that he can play every game. I mean, he's been a disaster. You would assume whoever that we'll talk about the new manager, I guess, coming in soon, but I would almost want to say as a new manager, okay, but make sure that guy's not there. So rescind his contract, because who's really going to want to come in with the culture as it is at the moment?
And yeah, we'll jump on into that one because obviously Olimpia have acted swiftly to get rid of Martin Palermo, but I think the writing was on the wall, I think, as well. I think he was coming on with a lot of pressure, but we're hearing a lot of names, Fed, that we're hearing a lot of people getting linked to this job. I think from the start, obviously, some of the names that I've seen, and we could obviously say no to some already. I've seen Andres San Martin, the former Daniel Garnedo manager, assistant for Paraguay, and obviously at other places as well. I've seen names to Antonin Alcaraz, who is currently the Paraguay U20 coach, but has had that time at Olimpia. I've seen names such as Carlos Tevez and so many other ones as well. But like Ralph said, who on earth is gonna? Well, yeah, I'll just start with one because I feel like it is only one. who on earth is going to come to this Olimpia right now with so much chaos going on? Because we're not even talking about a team that is also dealing badly on the international stage. They don't even have a stadium. So imagine that they have to go to the Defensores to get games. They can't even play games at Para Uno because obviously now that stadium's been demolished to make way for the 2030 World Cup. So, it feels like they're losing that sense of identity that they've always had beforehand. We talked about name and prestige, yet now it just feels like they're a team that has no identity at the minute.
Yeah, you got to pick it up totally, right? You have to go in that locker room and make the right decisions, put everyone to work, and put everyone on the right side of this situation, pushing forward. And that's not an easy job for the coach that's going to come into that locker room, a heavy locker room. So I would rather have an experienced coach going forward for the rest of the year. To be honest with you guys, we're 4 months into the year. You already lost 2 games in Libertadores. You can still pick up your stuff and try to get in Sudamericana somehow. This team does not look like it can have a run or a good Libertadores, to be honest. It doesn't look like it has enough from the players' point of it. And I think they can fit into a Sudamericana situation, a scenario where I could see that happening eventually. But if it was up to me, I look at the last coaches that had success in Olimpia, and it's Julio Cáceres. He was probably the last Paraguayan coach that was champions with their team, and the other one is, it's another experienced coach that had a tremendous week. I mean, we could even mention what he did with his humble Ecuadorian Mushuk Runa beating Cruzeiro in Brazil, and he's been out doing a fantastic work with small clubs. I'm talking about Coach Ever Almeida, a legend in Olimpia. This is a guy that's going to come into the locker room, and every player's going to respect him. Every player's going to look at him differently. He took them to the last final of the Libertadores that they played. So I would go for something like that, Roberto. Go for an experienced coach, go for somebody that has the pedigree, that has done it before, and somebody that can come into this locker room and fix stuff, because you're not going to bring in a young coach that's going to bring in a lot of players because you can't sign players. You don't have the wallet for it. And that was a big problem for Palermo. That's why he ended up playing the way he played, probably because he didn't have enough. He said it at a certain point where he played Libertad, the best Paraguayan team. He said, I looked at the bench and I didn't have anything else, guys. This is it. This is all that we have. So, I mean, I understand Palermo's situation. These last couple of coaches that Olimpia has had, they've had that trouble. They've had that problem of, okay, I have a big team, but I don't have the squad for it. I can't have a championship run with these kind of teams. So I give props to Palermo with what he did. He barely had anything in this squad, and he was champions last year. So, and it was his first championship. But there's no patience in teams like this. So I'd go for an experienced coach, Roberto. I think fans will respect a name like Ever Almeida. But I don't see you happy with my choice.
I personally feel, Ralph, you can jump in afterwards, but I don't know. I feel like when you've had that sort of connect with the national, with Olimpia, which, he is a legend. I don't think his legacy will be tarnished in any way, regardless if he comes in or not. But I don't know. I feel like at his age, was he in his late 70s, and yeah, I respect him for keep going like he is doing right now in Ecuador, and rightly so. But I don't know. I feel like the atmosphere there is just going to be too much for him, and he's dealt with everything and seen it all. But maybe at this age, where times have changed, and maybe that's why he's at Ecuador right now, where he's a bit more relaxed. It's not as demanding. The fact that what he's doing is, yeah, obviously they're getting their wins and whatnot, but I feel like there is not that much pressure. Whereas if he comes to Olimpia, he already has that, one, the name connection, and two, the fact that he is managing the biggest team in Paraguay, and getting that to not only just do well in the Libertadores, but also in the local league and whatnot, and to get other trophies too. So I just add into all that. I think it's more the sense of, is it outdated? Is it necessary? I feel like I said, Ralph, I don't know if that's something that he would want to do. At least if I was in his shoes, I would be just like, you know what? No, I don't need to, because I don't want that extra stress that they've always given to me over the years, and I just don't want to deal with that anymore.
That's part of the problem Olympia have, right? Is whoever picks this up is not in a good situation. They have like this difficult locker room. They have a lot of pressure because yeah, they're not going to get out of the group, but they can still make Sudamericana, so there's still something to do there. It's definitely not. I don't agree with it being a young coach, because any young coach will come in and get 10 games and then they'll go. So if I was Antolin Alcaraz, I would not touch that. I would be staying with the national team and going to a World Cup. I mean, it seems to make a lot more sense. Honestly, the manager I would have said at the beginning of the year, but not now because of the form they're on, would have been Felipe Jimenez at Dos de Mayo. I would have thought that could have been such a nice transition from someone who's played very well. He had time at Olimpia as a player, but they're not doing very well. And again, I don't think it's the right time. Along the kind of Almeida lines, if I was looking at it, I mean, Daniel Garnero is just sitting there. I don't think he's going to be expensive. He's in his worst moment as a coach, and Olympia's in one of their worst moments as a team. So that might be where you get the synergy of somebody that really wouldn't have touched this job if he hadn't failed at Paraguay, and Olimpia wouldn't offer him the job if they weren't in the situation they're in. But similar to Eva Almeida, it's somebody that can come in, can command respect because of what he's won there at the club, and knows everything very well inside out. So it can be quite an easy mid-season pickup. But I don't know. Is he interested in coming back to Paraguay? Has he burned that bridge after everything in the Copa America? So we'll have to see. But I'm on the similar vein. I don't know if it is Eva Almeida, but it definitely is that more experienced person that's just going to pick things up. And it's also not the very expensive foreign coach. I mean, I know Garnero is Argentinian, but it's not the very expensive, like, I don't know, 40 something manager that's had some experience in Argentina and Chile, and now he's coming in. I wouldn't go that way. Definitely not like a Carlos Tevez, for example. I don't think this is the right time for that either.
There was one name that for some reason, I'm not the biggest fan, but also at the same time, it would probably make sense too. Someone that actually spoke literally yesterday to all the radio stations, Julio Cesar Cáceres. Someone that is, like you said, he is local, he's young, he's been around the block beforehand, but as much as maybe that won't be something that will happen, I feel like at some point, like you guys are saying, like they're gonna look at all their options, they're gonna feel like, okay, maybe they're not interested. They're not going because I don't see Alcaraz leaving the U20 setup. It wouldn't make sense. You got the World Cup coming up, first World Cup for Paraguay in 12 years. I don't see him leaving that side, especially the way that they've gone through as well. It wouldn't make sense. But I don't know. Fede, for me, he wouldn't be the one. Again, it's hard to even pick a name at this point, but I feel like it just looks like Cáceres might be the guy. I might be wrong. Maybe they'll all surprise me and find some other name, but like maybe Garnetto, like you said, that's a really good shout, Ralph, about like a name that has been around the block, is available at the minute, and is also going through a tough time. Um, yeah, I for some reason I think Cáceres might be the guy that they get at the end.
Yeah, and it will kind of ease the pressure also from the fans, right? Because he is a player that, or he was a player back in the days that fans loved, and even when he turned and put and when he ended up being the coach of this team, he was champion. So he also has that on his shoulders. He did not do well with the Sportivo Luqueño, which is the other team he took over after being in Olimpia. But ever since, he hasn't had many opportunity to work. That's why I think he's desperate, right, to come back. He didn't like the way that they treated him on his way out of the team of the club, and I think he's waiting for a revenge, for a second opportunity. He's very young. He'll eventually get another call. I don't know if it's going to be now or maybe in a couple of years. But I want to see him working because he's one of the young coaches that has done really well in the Paraguayan football lately. And I get what Raf is saying about Dos de Mayo and teams like that, but I don't see Olimpia heading into that direction. I think they're gonna look at all the options outside of Paraguay first, and if they don't find something that they're crazy for, they might end up looking into the local coaches. But I don't think they're the first option.
Yeah, Ralph, I mean, is there that sense of Cáceres being the obvious name, even though he might not be the one that everyone wants?
Well, I think people might want him because, like Fede said, I mean, he's won the league before. He was an ex-player. I just think because of what happened to Luqueño, his stock is not as high as when he had left. Obviously, there's a way he left Olimpia, and then Luqueño he didn't do as well. So it's kind of his stock's maybe not as high at the moment, and it's not that kind of position. But he's in the running as much as some of the other names we've mentioned. As we're seeing, right, it's a strange position because it's really not a good time to take over Olimpia. But for a lot of coaches, this will be the biggest club they get to go to, and so people are there's going to be that kind of pull of, do I risk it? Do I not risk it? And I think ultimately you do need a coach, and this is why I went back to Carnero, because you do need a coach that really believes in themselves a lot, that they can turn this around. Because if you just look at it on paper, they don't have a defense. They have these players that are clearly not training properly or fully committed, right? That are on big salaries. They're losing games. I mean, it's just not a great moment. So you really need to believe in yourself as a coach to go in there and turn it around.
We'll have to wait and see what Olimpia does and what decision they'll make. For the moment, Ariano Torres will be the interim at the minute for Olimpia, so we'll see if hey, maybe they might go for him as well and just keep it permanent. We'll have to wait and see. Wouldn't be surprising, but we'll close out on Olimpia and see what happens next week in this kind of crazy world happening at El Decano del Fútbol Guaraní. As we switch gears now to their crosstown rivals, to Cerro Porteño, they were also in the competition this week. They went all the way to São Pablo in a match that obviously had a lot of tension even beforehand when the draw was announced because of the history of both these two teams, but also the fact that both of them were coming off of their wins in the first game. And, they obviously needed to get something out there to kind of build momentum into the next round of the Libertadores. They weren't able to do so. Cerro Porteño weren't able to do so. They gave him a good fight, Ralph. They gave him a really good fight, but ultimately Richard Rios was able to get the only goal of the game, shushing the crowd. Which crowd? I don't know. Apparently it was his fans, not to the Cerro fans, which were on the other side, but who knows at this point. But nevertheless, it was the result that, as much as it was expected as well, I genuinely thought it could have been worse if it wasn't for someone like Atito Fernandez stepping up. I thought had a really good game on the night. Had some really good saves and really almost allowed it, because it happened right after the Olimpia Velez game, that we could have been a deja vu in this sense of, a blowout. It wasn't the case for me, but I think Cedro will feel, I think, a bit bitter actually that they weren't able to leave São Paulo with at least a draw, because I think they really were able to go for it, and the Palmeiras side maybe didn't show it on the night as well.
Well, I think, honestly, if we're honest, I think Palmeiras were thinking about the Derby Paulista that's on Saturday and the game against Corinthians, and they really just did their job and kind of almost held Cerro at arm's length. I mean, I know it was only 1-0 on the night, but they could have scored more. Like you said, Gatito Fernandez had a good game. I thought Gustavo Velasquez had a really good game as well, right? I mean, when we're talking about signings in defense, Cerro got it right there, just where Olimpia were getting things wrong, because he's really kept up that kind of the Paraguay national team form we've seen. But honestly, it was a game where you just felt Cerro, for all that they were in it, because it was only 1-0, they never really created that many chances that made you think, okay, we're really gonna get in there. It almost got away from them at halftime, because I think Diego Martinez messed up in his substitutions, right? So at halftime, feeling like he has a chance to get into it, if you remember, he takes off Wilder Vieira and puts on Carrizo. And Vieira had been one of the more aggressive people in midfield. Carrizo obviously gives you the attack, not the defense. And then also Iturbe came on for Gomez, which we should talk about, right? Gomez making his debut in the Copa Libertadores, which is a pretty cool moment. And I thought he did okay with himself. But remember, he's a right back, and they played him at right midfield in front of Benitez. So that's just how defensive they were starting up. So when he went a bit more attacking, I mean, that's when really you saw Palmeiras going, okay, we're going to take this to Cerro. And that's when Gatito came into his own, until, to his credit, Martinez, he made another sub. And that's when he brought on Quintana for Aguayo. And they went more to that kind of more defensive shape, with Velasquez now pushing out to right back and Quintana in the middle. And so, I mean, it was an interesting game to watch. I mean, honestly, I don't think Cerro were close, even though the scoreline suggested, because I feel there was Palmeiras had it in them if they needed that. If they really needed that second goal, I think they could have found it. But the good thing for Cerro is They know they're still in this group. They know Palmeiras are going to qualify. They've not been blown out, so their goal difference is still good. And so they're positive to keep going forward to try and qualify.
They probably should have lost by more. That's the reality. After watching this game, Palmeiras barely tried. That's the feeling I got. You usually get this from Brazilian sides in these first games in Libertadores. They start out slow. They're just starting their Brasileirão. They're not that loose yet. They're not that focused, I would even say. And they still do it. They still find a way, that goal. I mean, they weren't even running that fast to try to get in that box. And Gatito Fernandez had a fantastic game. No doubt about it. Props to him, Roberto Fernandez. He's come back into his best form after a couple of mistakes, which we talked about several episodes ago. He's that's totally behind him. He's back to his best version. But I want to go beyond this game, guys. I want to go with what happened before this game. Sergio Araujo. I don't know if you guys heard of this situation, but this guy played the last Libertadores game at home against Bolivar. He was starting to gain momentum. He was starting to gain, consideration from the coach. He was given minutes lately. And all of a sudden, when the team has to fly for this game to Brazil, he comes into the locker room and a little bit shady, a little bit shaky. People don't see him the right way. And yeah, apparently he was up all night and he wasn't up to shape. He wasn't up to the standards of a club like Cerro Porteño coming into the practice and coming into the flight. So they left him behind. And this is a very serious situation. I mean, this is Libertadores, guys. You cannot have these things happening in a locker room, where you have young guys where the experienced players are the ones that are supposed to show the way. I mean, from Sergio Araujo, for me, this is breaking contract kind of stuff, in football. I mean, because it would happen in any job, guys. If I go drunk to my workplace, they're gonna fire me. They're not gonna let me work. And I don't know if they're gonna give this guy another chance, but it's a really weird situation. We've seen this from the big teams. We talked about Antonio Barreiro's situation in Olimpia just a couple of episodes ago, where they broke up his contract also after a mistake. I mean, to do these kind of things, it shakes up the locker room. It has to make people at least uncomfortable in these situations. I mean, this is a guy that was going to be considered in a game like this. This is a guy that could have contributed because Cerro did absolutely nothing in offense. Did they had an opportunity? No. To be honest with you guys, I don't think they had a shot at all against this Palmeiras. I think they wait for a draw and they ended up losing. I did not like what they did in this game. I thought they should have gone way more out. I expected a lot more from Cerro Porteño. I thought this was the big test, but let's see what they can do against Palmeiras at home. Maybe they can do something better at home, but this is the first game they've lost so far in their journey in Libertadores.
One shot on target in the box, actually, Fede, for Cedro. So again, but still, that's still nothing. No, that is nothing. And yeah, of course, Ralph, I think as well, the whole this whole Aquino situation, I feel it's so, like, why would you do this? Why on earth would you do this in such a crucial point of the season? Like, yeah, that's all I could really say.
Araujo
Araujo,
situation.
even see, that's how pissed off I am. I can't even get his name right. That's how pissed off I am.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the blame here should also be on Cerro that renewed his contract at the end of the year, right? Knowing that this is not the first time, right? He's had this issue. He had it before. So I don't know, like, was he such a key part of the team? I don't think so. Maybe it's a bit on Diego Martinez as well. We talked about this, sometimes the arrogance of the coaches that think they can turn things around. It's like all the data and all the history is telling you this is very unlikely. I mean, this is not a good time to renew. And he did it anyway, I guess, thinking that he could do something. And he put his trust in Araujo, and Araujo's kind of burned that. I mean, I think Cerro just did the right thing, though, right? He wasn't in the squad. There's the discipline coming. They're not going to I don't think they're going to help him anymore now. This should be the end of it for trying to, bring him back into the first team, because he's doing nothing to really deserve it. And you have so many attacking players. I mean, that's the one thing as well. It's not a position Cerro really need. But it's just, it's a shame for the player, but he's an experienced player, and I think it's more on the kind of coaching staff and the whole kind of department of football, which is all came in new and said, "Oh yeah, I think we want to renew this guy's contract," because we didn't have to be in this situation. But that's where it is. I think the good thing for Cerro is they have plenty of cover in that kind of whole area where they can find other attacking players.
The thing is, guys, the experienced players are not available for the coach right now. I mean, you have Iturbe that has barely come back. He didn't do absolutely anything when he got minutes against Palmeiras. So you had to go with Aguayo and Gomez, who had barely any minutes so far in First Division. I mean, very young guys to try to do something with Torres, who had been the best player in the first game against Bolívar. You can't expect Torres to score in every single game, to have a hat trick like he did in that first match. But you do need to expect a little bit more from the experienced players, from the ones that, make the money in this locker room. And they're not ready as of right now. No Cecilio Dominguez lately, barely chips in from Iturbe. I would be worried if I'm Martinez, Roberto, because he asked for a center forward and he did not get it during the preseason. That's why I think he ended up, giving minutes to Chico da Costa and even minutes to Sergio Araujo. He doesn't have that much as in regards to forwards.
Yeah, I think also in a similar situation of Olimpia in that case of like not working with as much as you can, you don't really have those fortunes. So they are doing as best as they can. But they got Cristal next. They got Cristal at home. I think that's certainly the one that they feel especially confident that they can get something. They just lost to Bolivar actually the other day as well. So hopefully that Cerro can look at this game against Palmeiras as kind of a blip, like, something like, okay, it happens, we just move on. But yeah, I think there's still a lot of things that can need to be fixed in order for them to really push to the next level of qualifying out of the group. As a team like Libertad, for example, are in a really comfortable spot in the Libertadores because they just got their second win and they are firmly leaders of a really tough group, Ralph. The fact that we were talking about how they had Talleres, San Paulo, Alianza Lima was always going to be tough, but them getting the result firstly in Lima, beating them 1-0, and then obviously now beating Talleres 2-0. It really looked like a performance that, again, Talleres were dominating them. They had 24 shots compared to 5, but again, similar to what Velez did to Olimpia in over there in Asuncion. Libertad took care of their chances, the little that they had, and they scored from it. 5 shots, Libertad scoring from 2 of them. Obviously, Ivan Franco in the 9th minute, and then Alcaraz getting the goal, and again Alcaraz getting the goal to to secure it. It shows that Sergio Aquino, yes, I'm getting his name right because he's a name that he's the better Sergio to give credit to. He's really getting the side working on all fronts, and I think it shows on the talent that they have that allows them to really perform. And yeah, obviously being in a good spot right now to qualify for the round 16.
Yeah, it was a really good result for Libertad because, like you said, Talleres are a strong team, and they showed that. What I think what Libertad did in terms of just the experience they have and that game management is they scored the goals at the right time. I mean, Ivan Franco scores after what, 9 minutes, so that kind of sets the tone. And then the Alcaraz goal. So let's talk about what Sergio Aquino's doing. He just brought him on as a sub, right? And then he scores. So he's getting that right in terms of the rotation of the team. And it was something that I remember we talked about before when Ariel Galeano was coach. He wasn't kind of getting it right with Libertadores. He was changing the team, but he was almost changing it, I think, too much. So they almost had 2 teams playing in the league and in the Libertadores. I think what Aquino's doing much better is the rotation and the more gradual changes and the different kind of players. And he's also relying on, I think, what are the key players, which is at the moment Lorenzo Melgarejo is just showing again how good he is and how important he is to the team. He makes the assist, right, for the first goal for Ivan Franco, and he's just been such an important player in terms of being able to not just be experienced and talented, but also he has the kind of energy still for the minutes. So while you have Roque and Tacuara, of course, have all the experience, it's not quite the same. They can't give the whole as much time in the game. So it was really good result. I mean, even Morinigo played well in goal, so to keep a clean sheet. And Libertad were helped so much also by last night's result. So last night, Alianza Lima surprised Sao Paulo by coming back from 2 down in Brazil to get a draw. So that means Sao Paulo only have 4 points and Libertad have 6, and they're going head to head next week. So we're really going to see I guess that's going to be now the big test for Libertad. But so far, I mean, they're really ticking all the boxes and doing very well.
Call it like it is. They are the best Paraguayan team as of right now. After 4 months in this 2025, they are top in the Paraguayan league in the Apertura. No doubt about it. No competition so far for this team. And in Libertadores, they have caught my attention, guys. I had my expectations with this team, but they did it against Alianza in the first game, and in quite a fashion, they did it against Talleres, just like Raf was saying. Not having the ball, but taking your opportunities. And I love the rotation. I love just having everybody on your tiptoes, everybody ready for the competition. I think Sergio Aquino has been very smart in that situation. I mean, contributions. Now you have Adrian Alcaraz coming in. You had Aguilar score against Alianza Lima. You have not needed Tacuara Cardoso. You have not needed contributions from Roque Santa Cruz yet, because they eventually will turn up in this Libertadores. I love that they have those young guys competing with them and taking their chances. This speaks really well of the 18 games unbeaten this team is having. I mean, they have not lost since November of last year, guys. And when you have that winning mentality, when you have that winning locker room, it's a special thing. You try to hang on to that situation, and I just want to see it keep on going, especially in Libertadores, where this team, I've always said it, they have enough. They have the best squad. They have young players. They have experienced players. They have a young goalkeeper that has already played for the national team. Let's look out for this Libertad. They can do something in Libertadores if they stay hot, if they don't have, obviously, problems with injuries. But as of right now, they look really well. They don't depend on just one or two players. Everyone is chipping in, and everyone's coming into their best version, just like Ralph said. I love Lorenzo Melgarejo. He's had tremendous games so far. Ivan Franco's always showing up also, and this is a player that we've seen peak before. He's coming into his best version again. I'm loving it. I think they're going to need players like him, and you have a whole bunch of young guys always coming into this team, trying to make it happen, trying to win a spot in this team also. So I'm looking forward to Libertad's years, guys. I mean, if you're a Libertad fan right now, you should go to every game, because this is the team that's putting up a show. This is the team that's really playing really well in Paraguay right now.
Yeah, I think they deserve all their flowers at the minute, and we'll see if they can continue that good run towards the qualification to the next round of the Copa Libertadores, as we switch gears now to the Sudamericana, to two teams that also need sort of a push. Obviously, Guarani needed that push, and they got that push over there, Fede, to be able to get the result that they needed against, a really difficult group, but they were able to get the result against Nacional Potosí, winning 2-0 on the day. Fernando Fernandez getting the goal, and then, of course, Juan Patiño scoring right before stoppage time in the first half. But a good win for them. But the same cannot be said for Sportivo Luqueño, as they fall again to a second straight loss, this time to Godoy Cruz over there in Mendoza. So yin and yang for both these Paraguay teams. But yeah, I think Guarani could be the happiest of the bunch, Fede, that they got the result that they needed, more so than what Luqueño unfortunately couldn't do.
Yeah, and I just said it, right? I mean, Libertad looks like they got no competition in the Apertura, but you never know with this Guarani team, especially if they keep on playing the way they do, Willy Mendieta and Fer. I mean, did you guys see that first goal? I mean, the way they connected, what an assist from Willy Mendieta. We're seeing magical stuff from him again this year, and he's one of the players that I've enjoyed the most, really. Fernando Fernandez scoring pretty much in every game, and you got that balance now in the midfield ever since they brought in Aldo Maiz. What a fighter he's been there, getting balls back for this team. I'm loving really what this team is building in Sudamericana. They got good results so far, and this is the way to go, guys. I mean, Juan Patiño contributing also in defense with his experience. He looks like he's healthy, like he can do something in this team. He even scored on this game after 8 years with the Guarani jersey, after going through several different clubs. But the injuries, we thought that his career was over at a certain point last year, and he's come back, and now you're seeing him in games like this in Sudamericana. It's a special situation from that point of it, and for the coach also. I think Chiqui Arce, you always got to watch out for this coach. He has his stuff, he has his team prepared, and as of right now, I see them playing in their style. They feel comfortable with it. And if they can keep everybody healthy, this team can keep on going because, you know, you got contributions from pretty much all the good players in this team and the young players also. So I'm really happy with what Guarani is doing. They got 3 games, I believe, now in the local league before playing against Independiente. One of those 3 games is against Libertad. So they got a really interesting calendar moving forward. But with these 2 wins, they're really comfortable in that first spot before probably going up against the strongest team of this group that will be Independiente or Avellaneda of Argentina. What do you guys think about it? Does Guarani really have an opportunity in this group? Because as of right now, they're sitting in that first spot.
They're doing well, and it's a really interesting, it's a very classic Chiquiase team. There were no foreign outfield players in that starting lineup, or Paraguayans. The only Argentinian was Servio, the goalkeeper, who, let's just mention that he scored twice at the weekend from the penalty spot, of course, in their win over Olimpia, and he's been very important coming back. And at the moment you feel that, yeah, Chiquiase has got everything right in terms of, he's always been such a good man manager. People always want to play for him. He has his style. I think with his style, what usually his downfall can be is that sometimes they can what's the word, be a bit stale in attack, because they can build up, it's slow build up, and sometimes it can get a bit stale. But when you have Mendieta and Fernando Fernandez, then you kind of solve that problem, because they're so good, their movement, their instinct is so good that you can have this system-based football building you up to the final third, and then you get the sparks and the kind of explosiveness. And that Mendieta Fernandez partnership so good. I mean, I think he set Fernandez up in the game against Boston River, and now here, and in the league it's been happening. I mean, it's the perfect combination they have. And so far, no team's able to deal with it. For sure, the next match in Sudamericana is going to be a harder challenge than Potosí at home. But everything is really pointing towards that they got a good chance here. I mean, remember, if they don't finish top, at least that second place, they get into the playoffs. So, I mean, it's looking pretty good for Guarani. And just over to Por Luqueño, I mean, yeah, the only Paraguayan side that's yet to win, except for Olimpia right now. Olimpia and Luqueño are the 2 sides now that aren't able to win in international competition. And while we were talking about Olimpia earlier, they might have the drop down into the Sudamericana, because you can finish third in your group and try and drop down. So Luqueño aren't going to have that option. So I mean, it looks like they're just going to be playing out these games now for the fans, and trying to see if they can get at least one famous win in their final 4 matches.
It's gonna be a tough ask. It's gonna be a tough ask for, you know, Guarani to be able to do this. Sorry, for Luqueño to do this, but I think Guarani can feel as if though they can build off sort of this confidence in order to really go and try to qualify to the next round. As we switch gears now to the U17 team, because they have finally done it, boys. They have qualified for the U17 championship for the World Cup over there in Qatar. They did so after defeating Ecuador on penalties in this sort of 5th, 8th place semifinal. 0-0, tight game, Ralph. But, you know, it was certainly something that I think was really something special that we saw in the penalty shootout. Again, it was against Ecuador that we saw in the U15 championship, but there was a little particular thing in, I wouldn't say even it's an incident, but sort of a genius part of thing, if you wanted to mention what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, it was an interesting game. I mean, I'm very happy that Paraguay in the World Cup, of course, right? Of course. But I sometimes think, what is under 17s football meant to be? Is it really meant to be this, like, such hard-edged professionalism, result-driven? But of course, you do want to go to the World Cups. But then it has been a shame, almost the last 3 games, I'd say, for Paraguay, have been these really tight matches, right? Where not just themselves, but both teams have really been, it's been so tense. There's been so much at stake. There's been these 1-0s. And here we even had the 0-0. As really both teams were cancelling themselves out. For a long time, Paraguay were playing for time, because they were just trying to take a breather against the Ecuadorians. So, I mean, sometimes I do think have we lost really what under 17 should be, which is more development of these players for professionalism, after not making them super professional in the moment. But anyway, I'm happy they qualified. And yeah, to the penalty shootout, it was the youngest player in the Paraguay squad is their goalkeeper. It's Felix Fernandez. He's only 15. I mean, most of the players are 16, 17. He's only 15. He's at Olimpia. And he's at sometimes been a bit nervous, especially under the high balls and the crosses in the tournament. But in the penalty shootout, I think he came into his own, right? And he was very quiet. He was very relaxed until Lerma, who does have professional experience with Independiente del Valle, came up to shoot. And then he almost went into Dibu Martinez mode and started like goading him. And he was saying, you know, like, hit the ball at me, look at me, hit the ball at me, look at me. And he managed to do that, and Lerma shoots his shot over, and it's the only penalty in the shootout that was missed. Mauro Coronel stepped up afterwards for Paraguay to score the winner, and they're through to the World Cup. They're playing Argentina today at the time of recording, but that game doesn't really matter. I mean, it's just for show because both of those sides are in the World Cup in Qatar. And so it's great news. First time, I think you told me, Roberto, first time since 2001, the Paraguay in both under 17s and under 20s World Cup. And then the year later, 2002, they were in the Senior World Cup. So let's hope 2026 can be the same.
It's been a good run, Fede. You know, the fact that, you know, like I said, U15, well, look at the whole year as a whole, let's say, just on Paraguay as a whole. Pre-Olympico champions, that's U23. They go and play in the Olympics. They win the U15 championship with Mariano Ugasic, obviously is the coach of the U17. They're doing well in the senior team. The mayores, as we say in Spanish, they're very close to qualifying for the first World Cup in 16 years. The U20 side with Antonin Alcaraz just qualified, and now the U17 team just qualified for the World Cup. So it's been good momentum. I don't think we want to give all the mention to Robert Harrison, but probably to Elio Palaroso, you know, who's very much came into this team, or at least into the setup at the APF, to really guide sort of this sort of youth national team, and has obviously helped so much now.
Yeah, we're gonna need to build a new room probably for all those World Cups that we're gonna get. Incredible, right? It's amazing to feel this way that we're going to so many World Cups, that we got so much to look forward to after such a long drought, you know, after waiting for such a long time for, you know, the young teams, the young players to come about. And yeah, it is part of a huge project that we talked about before, that the FA is heading with new fields and the way that they're working. Obviously, Elvio Palaroso has a lot to do with this. He's the brain behind everything. Yeah, he has so much experience. It's just a matter of looking at everything that he's done along his life to give him his respect, and to obviously listen to his wisdom. And he's picked the right coaches also, and he's made the right decisions at the right time, and that's been, I believe, key in the way of, you know, the way they've handled different situations. As of right now, you have a winning mentality also in these guys, because they did it in the under 15th. Now they did it in the under 17th. I mean, I'm not forgetting that first game against Peru where they showed their best stuff and they scored 5 goals. Then all games were tough. All games were really hard. You know, the worst loss was against Argentina. They're going to have a revenge now with the World Cup under their shoulders. In this last game to close up the Sudamericana. But that penalty shootout was tough. You know, you didn't know which way it was gonna go. When it always comes down to that situation, you know, the nerves were there for the players, but it is part of the experience. You kind of want to see these guys go through that, the pressure, and not think that it's all pretty, that it's all going to be just winning and winning. It is part of the learning process also, and I love that situation. I also like the way Mariano Ugasic handled the squad, you know, mixing it up, always changing players up, not always, you know, putting the same players on the pitch, just trying to put the best team out there. It was well managed also by Mariano Ugasic, and props to the coaches, right? Because it is important for Paraguay to be out there in FIFA competitions. I think this puts us back in the market. Agents are going to look at our players differently now with these kind of qualifications for the World Cup. It is obviously very good news that the World Cup has more and more teams now. I think it was even CONMEBOL that said that they want more than 60 national teams or something like that for the World Cup that's going to be played in 2030. So, I mean, they're going all out in that sense, which is a good opportunity for us also to compete at the highest level. And I'm looking forward to that, for some of these guys to stand out. As of right now, I don't see a player that I can point at and say, this is going to be a crack. This is going to be a player that's going to make the difference in just a couple of years. But there are a couple in this young team, and I want to see them evolve. I want to see them keep on growing. And we got a World Cup to do it in just a couple of months.
Yeah, like you said, Ralph, to close it out, I think it is very tough to always see what's going on at U17 level because sometimes, you really are still developing. You really haven't hit the senior side in either first team football. I mean, the one example could be probably Pedro Villalba, who's doing it at Libertad, but not really much else anywhere. So, but that's okay because again, they're still young, they're still developing, and yeah, who knows? Maybe in a couple of years, these guys could be household names. U20, U23, senior team. I mean, they all have to start somewhere. So I think building that experience to go to World Cups, the fact that they haven't been one since 2019, that was the last U17 World Cup. So this is pre-pandemic. I think it shows that at least to make it to a World Cup allows them to really build themselves up to, future tournaments if they do make it that far.
Yeah, definitely. And remember, I mean, this is now also at these levels, you start kind of filtering out the people that really are going to end up being professional. And so when they won the U15s, a lot of people commented that most of the players had TikToks and they would call themselves creators. They didn't call themselves footballers, right? And a lot of people were surprised, I think older generations, but it was like, well, they're not footballers yet. So they're only 16, 17. And so even now, like you were saying, only a handful of them will have played senior football, professional football. So there is still that long way to go. But what we're seeing is there's a lot of these players are in the right path. And that I think you were mentioning earlier, all this success that has happened is kind of created this much better, I guess, breeding ground for professionalism in Paraguay from a young age, especially the pitches. I think by doing the Cardiff and having also the pitches in the New Guasu Park, so basically just having turf, like astroturf pitches that people can play on and that aren't these horrible bobbly dry pitches where you can get injured, because there was a lot of injuries before in youth level. And remember, if you're a kid at 16, 17 and you get injured, that can be the end of it, because who's going to pay for your treatment? Who's going to look after you afterwards? In fact, that almost happened to Diego Gomez, but thankfully, because Diego Gomez was at Libertad, they got him through the ligament injury that he had. I think it was about 17, 18 when that happened. That's why he actually debuted so late, considering he's such a good player. So all of this is all like building up to one thing, to making Paraguay, making it a better environment to kind of have professionalism. And now these kids are going to be on the world stage and have a great chance to live that dream.
Absolutely.
Let me just get something in, because it's I think it's totally valid what Raf is saying. The point of becoming professional. I think that's the most important part right now, because you got pretty much 6 months between the Sudamericana and the World Cup, and these guys are winners now. They're coming back to the country as winners, and it's all about that situation, Roberto. Just the way they develop also as people, as persons in the society, and how professional they can be to take that leap, just like Diego Gomez did to Europe. That's what I want to see, because the under 20, I'm remembering Angel Aguayo, who tried to go to Santos to play with Neymar, and he's back in Sudamerica because of an agent and because the deal couldn't be done. So a lot of stuff and a lot of these careers depend on those small details, if they can make that leap also.
Absolutely. I mean, we can go on a full discussion of how the Paraguayan footballer could make it to the next level, but I think you're right. I think they definitely have to just, be able to just do their thing, be with the right people, have the good attitude, and then yeah, whatever happens just puts it into perspective and it's credit to what they've achieved in their small careers. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, congratulations to the U17 side, to Mariano Ugasic's team to have qualified for the World Cup in Qatar, as we close out another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.